we hear the term performance program used quite often.
A lot.
And I think we got to talk about like what that actually means and what that actually is. Like, we've also talked about like, look, doing something is better than nothing. And, doing something is probably going to improve your performance at something, right? But what is it? And what are the foundations of the program? What is it built around, like principally? And is it really giving you the things that you need or want to perform in the way that you need or want to perform?
Yeah, because the last podcast, even though I don't know what order they come in, but the last podcast we talked about was when we go to courses with IEP and we ask them, what do you guys train versus what do you need in the job? And there's a disconnect there. And then how do we come in and marry up and making sure what they need for the job matches, hopefully, with what they actually train and creating what we would deem as a good performance program for that agency.
Right. So if I'm an athlete, that's what I want. Like, I want to make sure, like, I just want to know the time I'm investing, right? The energy, the emotion, the sweat,
suffering,
blood, sweat, and tears. You know? Like, it's equating to what I need it to equate to. I also want to have fun doing it, right? And there's those other idealistic things that come along with it. But I just, like, particularly at this time in my life, or if I'm a professional doing a thing and I have competed at a high level, at an higher level as an amateur at doing certain things, and I know I wasted a lot of time doing things. I had to unwind a sticky web, oftentimes, of spending too much time or just doing completely the wrong thing, or doing like things okay but not great. That's not a place I want to be in my life anymore, particularly, again, if I'm going to make an investment in however you define the term investment, I want to know. So principally, when we're looking at like how to develop a performance program, what are the two things, like foundationally or principally, that we're looking at here or should be looking at here?
So number one is building injury resilience. And then number two is developing those performance metrics that they're going to use specifically for that sport or job.
So when I hear you say injury resilience, let's define what that means. We talked about this before as well on a different podcast about like training through injury. And we said very specifically, there is no such thing as an injury prevention program. If somebody is selling you that, or if that's how they've termed it, that's how they marketed to you, I would run far and fast from that. That is clickbait, that is salesy, and it is impossible to do that. Now, having said that, when we use the word resiliency, right, injury resilience, what do we mean?
So it is building those supporting areas that could get injured from any sort of movement activity that you go through.
And what do we know are the most common based on, again, the metrics that we've collected to be those areas?
So back is number one, knee, and then shoulder are number 2 and 3. And that is from collected a bunch of data and surveys from over 400 officers who've done the thing and are still doing the thing, and that's what they experience on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, so if you got 400 people that are telling you that stuff, how many people out there exist that didn't get surveyed, haven't said anything, or afraid to say it because they might get pulled out of the game, or then they'd have to admit that they have a problem that they have to address. So that's the next thing. Okay, great. So injury resilience, and then the other thing,
developing performance metrics, and those metrics for the law enforcement officer are strength, speed and power, and agility. Not in that exact order. It's strength, agility, speed, and power. But those are the top 3 performance metrics that they see are the most value and most used on the job.
Got it. So when you're building a performance program around those 2 things, let's talk about like, what should that look like ideally?
So the main focus should be movement as what they're going to use. The next piece.
Because it fits into the agility, speed, and power.
Exactly. And again, going back on what movement is sprinting, change of direction, landing, jumping, backpedal, all those athletic movement patterns that you see on Sundays, Mondays, whatever the football game is playing. You're seeing those athletes do those movements. That is what the core of athletic movement is.
Yeah, not to be confused with our foundational movements that we use in the gym that can be connected to exercises like a squat pattern, a hinge pattern, a push, a pull, those kind of things. So again, not to confuse or blur the lines.
Movement patterns.
Yeah, what you see happen on the field, the court, the mat, not what happens in front of the squat rack on the rubber mats kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so, all right. So in terms of building that out, that's foundationally, that's kind of what we're looking at here. How does it look? How do you start to put it together? If I'm the consumer sitting out there kind of listening to this, like, okay, I'm ready, I'm listening. I want to reevaluate my program here. What are some of the key components to do that well?
So the order of programming that you would want to do in order to benefit those particular skills and movements. You start off with a good warm up. You always want to prime the body from I'm stagnant, I'm sitting down. If we were to go from right here to work out, we want to do a warm up so we're not risking injury to a higher level, because there's always a risk. We can just decrease the risk. Decrease the chances of it happening in training. You never want to get hurt in training. It happens out on the field or in competition. That's a whole other thing. But in training where it's controllable, that's where you can reduce the risk.
Yeah, we talked about that too in our injury one. Like we had 100 people in this room right now, and I asked how many people have been injured in training versus injured in the game. Like how many hands would we see go up
for training?
Yeah, it's going to be in the training photo. I mean,
I'm a part of that group.
Yeah, you were part of that group. We talked about that.
I've been victimized.
Yeah, same. Right?
Hey, it's happened to me too. And again, it happened from a poor warm up. I didn't prepare myself.
The point of me bringing that up is I think people can relate.
Yeah.
Right. Like this happens if you're doing it long enough, and you don't have, it is part of the process sometimes. However, what can we do to reduce the propensity of that? If I had to go back, I would have changed a lot of things I was doing, right? That maybe could have helped me avoid that problem.
Yeah.
Or those problems. There are many, but those problems. Okay, great.
Next step after the warm up is you start with your speed and power. So those are the main thing. It is the main thing that you're going to use on the job. That is the main thing you want to focus on in your workouts. So It could be sprinting. 1, it is the most demanded skill. 2, it's got the most CNS requirement. So your mind is going to be needing it. And it is the fastest and shortest energy system used. So there are 3 different main energy systems. This is the shortest one, the phosphocreatine system, essentially.
So people can probably relate.
I know, you'd laugh when I go nerdy.
The phosphocreatine system.
So again, if anybody wants to go deep on that, they can call Aaron. I'll get his number out at the end.
Don't call Jake.
Actually, the most, like, on the other side of things, and I wouldn't generally do this, but on Red Dot, when we release our podcast over there from the gym, one of our most downloaded episodes is on creatine.
Yeah, it was
really interesting. It kind of blew me. It was like, do we really need to talk about this? Like, doesn't everybody know about creatine already? And apparently they do not, and they just want to know more. So, but the point of that is what you're practicing first is the skill that requires the highest demand from a nervous system perspective and an energy systems perspective. So putting the higher skilled, also higher risk movement at the beginning, where you need to get as much out of it as you can, that gets put at the front, not at the end. Right. We're not pressing our sprint, after we've done.
You don't want to go do a 5x5 back squat, maybe some RDLs, and then go sprint.
Ooh, see.
Well, in the sport of CrossFit,
there's definitely a time and a place for that, because I could make the argument of like, I'm going to make this up. Like, there's definitely a time and place in a real world situation for that, I think, of like, I need to be able to sprint after I've done something.
Right.
How can I still recruit? Training different.
In training, right? So that we can build the skill, right? And download the software onto the hardware. We should be doing that up front when we're the most efficient at doing that.
Absolutely.
You only know how good you are at snatching if you hit an assault bike sprint before it.
Yeah.
It's a real fact.
So again, like, what does that do? Yeah. That increases risk, right? It also presents issues with performing that skill really well if you're already pre-fatigued.
Yep.
So if you look at training as practice, right, what we want to do is make sure that we are practicing with everything that we can possibly practice with, going back to energy systems and things that are nerdy for people. So yes, it gets put up front. That's the point we're trying to make there. However, when we ask, where are these things being put into programs, sometimes we hear that, right? Yeah. Because they've adopted some other training program that doesn't make quite as much sense for them, specific to the job and what they have to perform on demand most of the time.
Yeah, most of them are going to do what they like first, or what they want to do first.
Or what they seemingly think is hard or is going to give them the most benefit. And then I ask the question, like, well, why do you think that? And you ask a couple more questions, and they might not have a very good answer. They generally don't have a very good answer for that, unless it's what they've known, right? And what they've been, quote unquote, successful with in the past, like what gave them abs, right? What helped them lose as much weight? What helped them get up on the leaderboard in their gym? Those are all metrics. Sure, you can measure those things. How much value are you putting in that versus what we're talking about here, which is the total programming and what it results to in the end. Yep.
Next piece of it is the strength piece. That is the next energy system in demand. Next most demanding in terms of like CNS and neural aspect. But it's also going to be compounding on what you did for the speed and power. It's only going to make that better. We did another podcast where we talked about that. If both of us did a speed and power program and we only did athletic movement, and then all of a sudden he started doing strength training on top of that, we could do the exact same speed and power training. He's going to see a lot more growth because he added the strength piece. It's only going to increase his force production, his neural drive, all those aspects. It's just going to amplify the movement versus me just doing the skill work only.
So actually it came up in this one too, where we were talking about like if we were doing an agility program and then Heppner decided he was going to start doing some weight training, some resistance training, and how that would translate over into making him probably better than you because he's now downloaded more software and hardware onto the frame, right? Which creates more of a demand, which also creates more strength, more speed, power in order to do things from. So what's consistent here is what we're managing is the gas tank, right, that everybody has. And everybody's gas tank is a little bit different. Yep. Or that's the fuel systems.
What did I eat? How much sleep did I get?
Energy systems.
Time I got?
Look, and like there's a lot of knowns there. Like we know what specific application of exercise will do in terms of creating a demand, which also obviously starts to decrease the level of that gas tank. And part of that gas tank is your neural drive, your neural system, right? So it's not just carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, and pyruvate, and all the things that go into that, going back to getting nerdy, but also your ability to manage oxygen consumption and utilization and where we want to put that in. We talked about that a little bit before on the capacity side of things. So we're managing this appropriately, again, to get the max benefit of the work that you're putting in. Okay, what's next?
And then we have our capacity and accessory work. So this is where we kind of go into what you were talking about.
I'm on the bottom of the rung. Did you notice that?
Yeah, all the time, man. Why?
It's the least important.
Because I'm the shortest.
No.
So the main reason is because one, it is not the most used for what they do.
Okay, so
now
in order
for
of
you,
priority.
it's in the order of priority is not the most
And
used.
just to clarify, for the capacity piece, it's usually anaerobic endurance. So we're on the same page.
Anaerobic, and then there is some aerobic endurance in there.
Which is funny because when you went to most courses, they actually do it as like second.
They ranked it.
They ranked it as second.
They did it second, but they ranked it as what?
That's a good question. 7 or 6
So it was
out
pretty
of 9.
low.
Yeah, it was,
but
it was
somehow they do it.
relatively
So
low.
it's important
So in
to
their
realize
own
that.
programs, they were putting it in, so they ranked it high, like number
like
2.
2 was 2.
Yeah, it was strength, anaerobic endurance, right?
Yep.
Was number 2. So what did that look like? It looks like a lot of assault bike, ski,
Just intervals. It's 2 on, 2 off. Yeah, essentially anaerobic.
Yeah, just high intensity interval training, essentially just getting gassed out, putting a lot of effort in. And then the accessory pieces there, it can be interchanged either before capacity or after capacity. Both are done at that time because it is the lowest CNS requirement. The energy system lasts the most or the longest of all the energy systems. And so you can train those, and it's typically a low skill movement.
There you go.
And not have a risk of injury.
Yeah.
In training.
If you're fried here, it's like, I can do that.
Yeah.
Right,
You can do dumbbell bench or machine bench or lat pull downs all day, even though you're gassed.
How much skill does it take to get on an assault bike and kick your ass? Not a lot of skill.
I feel bad saying that.
It doesn't take a lot of skill.
Yeah,
it takes
no,
a
you're
lot
absolutely right.
It takes a lot of effort, grit,
Yeah.
right? And
your intensity might be there, but I mean, the movement is subconsciously already there.
And that part goes back to what you're saying about the sprinting at the end.
Yeah.
You want to be able to do that when you're tired. This is where you can train that. I'm tired.
So glad
now I
you
need
brought
to grit through something hard. That's why we put the capacity in. That is another reason why we put the capacity in at the end.
So the same benefits you're getting from training the fuel systems or the energy systems and the skill of sprinting, right? You're able to build those energy systems at the end when you're working your capacity that complement the sprinting that you're doing up front. So by putting it at the end, when you come back to your sprinting, you have built more capacity to be able to do that sprint better.
Absolutely.
But the keys takeaways there are low skilled movement, right? First, it's the order of least importance. So we put it in the order of least priority, right? Within the programming, the least level of skill that is required to do these accessory movements are like, these are your arm movements, right? If you like to train arms, like we put those at the end. How much skill does it take to do an arm curl, right? Or dumbbell curl, barbell curl, or again, I use the assault bike. And you said it decreases the propensity for you to potentially get injured doing a high skilled, high demand from a skills perspective movement. So I said there are no programs that are injury prevention programs, but there is a way to prevent at some level getting injured in your training when you're programming it smartly, right? Which is essentially what you're kind of building out here.
Right. Yeah. The whole thing is, again, just built off of, we're trying to get you better at whatever your job is, not trying to get better at lifting weights, not trying to get just necessarily better at sprinting, but more so getting better at sprinting on the job, changing direction on the job, traversing obstacles on the job. Everything else just amplifies those abilities.
Right. So versus, again, if we went all the way back to the beginning and wrapping this up and looking at all these various metrics and trying to be good at all these things, or in your case, being mediocre at best at a lot of
I don't know what I'm
things.
supposed to be good at. I have an idea, but he deals with given ranges of concepts he knows could pop up and the likelihood of those, whereas I can't. So I have various fitness metrics that can only be measured various ways.
So take a look at your fitness programming. It's not hard to do that. If you just take those basic concepts and basic principles of what's the order of importance, right? How do my energy systems work? What's the skill level required for each? How much time am I spending in each of those? And understand how one complements, each component there complements the other, and then bring that all back to, like, again, your hierarchy of like, what's important for my job? Like, what do I really need to do? And then other people might be thinking a little bit about this too. Like, how does it complement some of the other things I'm doing? Like, I go to BJJ school and I roll on the mat. Like, how does it complement me there? And again, with all of those components and how do I start a jiu-jitsu class, generally speaking? I either start with the basic jiu-jitsu school warm-up where we run around the room, we do some forward rolls, we do some shrimping and whatever else. What is that? That's the warm-up, man, right? And it's practicing really basic skills, right? Sometimes I think a lot of times it's overdone, or maybe you see guys just go out there and they just start rolling, they start flowing a little bit, nice and easy. And then we break it out into a skill, right? And we practice that skill for the day, whatever that move is that they're teaching or whatever else. And then they move into some drills where now we ramp up the intensity a little bit with the skill after we've been warmed up, after we've now had the brain power to take in what we're supposed to be doing, get really focused. And then towards the end there, we spar a little bit. We go a little bit higher. We start to work through a little bit higher intensity. That's how BJJ works. But when you're looking at like what you're doing in the gym, it's similar, but it's different, right? And what you just put together is going to complement what you're doing on the mat,
right?
100% through all of those things.
So the last thing I'll leave you with is CrossFit is the same thing. If you go to a good CrossFit affiliate, what they usually start with is a warm-up. Doesn't necessarily have to do with the movements you're going to see that day. Sometimes it's like getting a salt bike and we're going to go for 3 minutes, just get your blood.
Get the heart rate going.
Yeah, we get moving.
Get body temperature
and then
up.
usually, depends on the gyms you go to, you might jump into a strength piece. Usually the strength and skill, they're not doing both, but sometimes you do. Sometimes it's like a strength and then a skill. But most of the time it's one. So let's just take a skill. Hey, today we're going to be working on kipping muscle ups, and we're going to also work some hollow arches and some good ring swings. And then usually what happens is that takes a lot of brain power and usage and skill and coaching and whatnot. And then we go into the capacity piece, the metabolic conditioning piece, Matt Conn, if you're a CrossFitter at the end, and that usually has a muscle up in it.
Right.
Because we've worked on the skill, now we're going to try and test it out. Now that you've used all your brain power over here, and we have scalable options if you can't do it. And so most CrossFit gyms are literally built the same way if they have a good coach.
Right. That's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up because a lot of people have adopted CrossFit as their mode of exercise to be fit for all these things, right? I know a lot of police officers that do CrossFit. There's a lot of value in it. Going back to the sport and all the things you just kind of outlined there, how many could you get it all done in, let's just say you were training 6 days a week.
Okay.
Could you get it all done in one workout a day, 6 days a week, and still get all your strength, all your power, all your capacity, all the skills for all the things that you are not know, that you don't know about that you might have to do that you're trying to be mediocre at? Do you have enough time in that an hour, 90 minutes to get all that done, or are you trying to, or are you splitting?
That's what you're saying. Are you saying, like, let's see if I'm tracking, is I don't have enough time to get all done, so I have to focus on things that I should be focusing on.
And then come back maybe later in the day, right? To do some of the other things. Like I do some more skill work in the morning. Maybe my strength work happens in the afternoon.
If it's a sport, okay. So if you're coming at me like I'm training for a sport, then I have multiple sessions a day and they all look different. You asked me this question earlier, actually, yesterday. You said, hey, how are you training right now? And how I answered was probably what we're talking about now. The first thing I come into, let's just take, so I have a first session that has fitness, right? And so I only do fitness. Let's just take that out of consideration.
Gotcha.
Let's just look at the shooting side of things.
Yep.
So when I come and do my programming for shooting, the first thing I'm going to do when I go out in the range is I'm not adding a bunch of complex things. I'm doing very basic things that require all the thought up here. Usually it's doubles. I'm not even drawing. Usually it's I'm working grip, I'm working doubles and
taking
vision.
the variables out.
Yeah, I'm just only working doubles right here. No shot timer. I don't give a crap what it says. I'm just working doubles, making sure I can get good groupings, right? And then I'll slowly adding on complex movement. And then at the end, I'll do a capacity piece at the end to essentially work on everything to bring it all together. But I say that for the very end because if I do that first, I might poo-poo on the rest of it, and I focus on the things that are important first. And then I also know how my day's going to go. Like, if I start doubles and they freaking suck, then I'm going to scrap the rest of the day and only work on that skill the whole time because that's more important than everything else.
Right. And are you coming back for another session during the day is what I'm asking.
Oh, if I do a fitness session in the morning and I come back for a shooting session at night, I'm not coming back for another shooting session at night. I might, like late night, I might come back and do dry fire in the barn and say, hey, well, my doubles suck. So why did they suck? Well, it's because I kept having trigger freeze because I have too much strong hand tension on my pistol. Okay, well, how do I fix that?
So my point in saying all that is this is an athlete who trains very specifically for a very specific sport. He's divided his training days, his training program, his training days, his training hours, minutes, however you want to do it, up over various times. And he's managing fuel systems. He's managing his brain power, his CNS. He's managing all that to do that. The reality of it is for the law enforcement officer who's also trying to be an athlete is like, do they have time to get to the gym, for 2 hours a day? What they're telling us and what we're finding out, or sorry, not what we're finding out, but what we know is that they don't have that much time, right?
Actually, we have a survey question on that. An average time is an hour.
So they have a finite amount of time to get a lot of things done. Again, hence going back to the importance of order, right, and process. The other part of that is they have a lot of other things they have to worry about during the day, including going out onto the street or going onto a call out or something else where they have to be ready to go. So again, thinking about that and like where you're adopting your fitness program, whether it's CrossFit or not, and whether you're at a great gym who's got great program with great coaching or not, like think about that and like, are you getting the things you need based on the process that you kind of just went through? And I think, again, it's not impossible to get that. I think there's a lot of places that do a really great job. But if you're looking for another solution or another answer, think about what you kind of just went through and kind of where Aaron's head is in putting this together and the time that you actually have to invest in doing it. And again, I've said this before, like I want to make sure that I'm maximizing I just don't have, as I get older, my time is way more valuable.
We talked about it earlier about how you and I pay for programs to do our program.
Exactly. Like I want to
jerk around with that myself anymore.
I don't want to program for myself. I don't want to think about myself doing that. Like thinking about other people doing that all the time. Yeah, I'll go to somebody else for that because that takes time to do, right? I can be critical of it when it comes in and I can ask questions, but once it's there. And I just wake up, I know what's on my workout for the day. It's very refreshing to not have to think through it. So again, the whole point of that is like, think about, your training as an athlete. Am I training effectively and efficiently for the things I need to do and be able to perform on demand versus somebody else's programming that is maybe for something else in more general. And again, working across these various fitness metrics when what we've been able to do is boil down the ones that we know are really important for you. And we're very specifically attacking those.